feeling well and not doing well. And I just hope and pray that that is behind us and that we can look forward to this upcoming season, the season of Lent, this time of fasting. It comes to me as no surprise that as we're preparing ourselves for Lent, that we're going to come under attack.
Amen.
That we're going to go through some difficult things and some difficult times. In fact, as all the prophetic words this morning encouraged us, is to seek God, trust God in the difficult times. And I want you guys to know that I believe that you're right on with what God's saying, mainly because that's exactly what my sermon is about today too. Trusting God in the times of dryness. Psalm 63 talks about we are in a dry and weary land, but yet we will trust God and He will be our water. He will provide nourishment for us. And this morning I want to encourage you that God is faithful. We're going to experience Him some more today. There's another big event, despite church, this morning that's happening today. Of course, we all know what day this is, right? Super Bowl Sunday. Super Bowl Sunday. Those of you that love football, this is the pinnacle of the football day. Even those of you that don't love football might still find yourself watching the game. Everybody but Genevieve, she boycotts it vehemently. But for the rest of us, are you excited about Super Bowl Sunday? No. Of course not, because you hate the teams that are playing. But today is the one day of year that all of America and a large part of the world watches football. People will tune into the game even if they haven't watched a game all season long. Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is the biggest game of the year. It's the culmination of 5 months of grueling gridiron matchups. But for most of us, it's just an opportunity to eat together with friends and enjoy the commercials and eat a bunch of food, right? Here's a couple quick fun facts about the Super Bowl. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Super Bowl Sunday is America's second largest food consumption day. Anyone know what the first largest is? Thanksgiving, that's right. Now, everybody knows this guy. He's going to be going for his sixth Super Bowl ring. He's a beautiful, beautiful man, isn't he? I tell people all the time, I say at work, here's why I hate Tom Brady. I said, Tom Brady, he's good looking. Tom Brady is rich. Tom Brady has talent. Anybody know who Tom Brady's wife is? Supermodel Giselle, right? So he not only is good looking, he's married to someone that's even better looking. And you know that Giselle has even more money than Tom Brady? I said he's got looks, he's got money, and he's got talent. I said I'd settle for one of the three.
You married a wife that was better looking though.
That's true. I already have that, but I'm not worried about that. I just want Tom Brady. Tom Brady's going for his 6th Super Bowl ring. But does anybody know which team has lost the most Super Bowls in history?
Broncos.
Who?
The Bills.
Not the Bills.
Broncos.
The Broncos. The Broncos have one more loss. The Broncos have dropped 5 Super Bowl matchups.
Wow.
The Bills have 4 in a row. I mean, that's... Wright will forever be ingrained in your memory. Did you know that the most expensive ticket to Super Bowl I, which was played January 15th in 1967, cost $12. That was the most expensive Super Bowl. Now, if you were to adjust for inflation, that's the equivalent of about $89 today. But even at that bargain price, Super Bowl I didn't sell out. Now, if you're thinking about going to the Super Bowl tonight, you better be prepared to shell out at least $3,200 per ticket. Did you know that Cleveland is the only current NFL city that has neither hosted a Super Bowl nor seen its team, the Browns, make an appearance in one? It's tough to be the Browns.
Amen.
And only one quarterback has won a Super Bowl with 2 different teams. Anybody know who? Peyton Manning. That's right, Peyton Manning. The only quarterback to win it with 2 different teams, the Broncos and the Colts.
He deserves 6.
Super Bowl Sunday. Now, many of you may be tuning in tonight only for the halftime show. Justin Timberlake, JT, right? Exciting. You know why this is a big deal? Because this is the first time that Justin Timberlake's been invited back to the Super Bowl. And certainly you remember why he hasn't been invited back in recent times. 2004, 14 years ago, that he and Janet Jackson performed a halftime show that shocked the world. With the wardrobe malfunction, I did not put a picture of it. But you can find it easily. This scene, that halftime show became a scene, became a very memorable part of history on a couple of occasions. It was the most, according to TiVo, the live television, it was at that moment the very most rewound time of live television in TiVo history. Because everyone was like, what did I just see? What happened? It was also the event that forced the NFL to change the amount of time on their broadcast delay.
Yep.
Up until then, it was running live. Now they, I think, do 25, 30-second broadcast delay in order to avoid any unfortunate wardrobe malfunctions in the future. The Super Bowl. One of the most exciting live sporting events. And most of you will be watching, even those who don't know anything about football. So what is football in a nutshell? For those of you that don't have a clue what the game is all about, I'm going to sum it up for you in a few phrases. 2 teams. 1 ball. The end zone. Get the ball to the end zone. And get it there as many times as possible. Preferably more than the other team. That's football. Basically in a nutshell. Now, all the timeouts, penalties, plays, commentary are just side issues from the main thing, that there's 2 teams, a ball, and an end zone. Now, while you're trying to get the ball to the end zone, there are forces fighting against you.
Amen.
There are tackles, and they drop you to the ground.
Amen.
There are fumbles when you drop the ball on the ground and the other team picks it up. There are missed passes and failed plays. Sometimes you make a little progress. Sometimes you make a lot of progress. Sometimes there are setbacks, but the point is to gain as much yardage as possible and push your way down the field into the end zone. The purpose of the game is to get the ball to the other side of the field. The best teams and best players never get their minds off the end zone. See, their purpose is the end zone. You could say they maybe are living for the end zone. That's football. That's the Super Bowl. But when it's all said and done, it's just a game. It's just a game. Yeah, there's a lot of money at stake, and there are trophies, and there's bragging rights, but in 8 months from now, it's all going to be forgotten, and the teams will start all over again with the same goal in mind. Get to the end zone. It's just a game. What we're doing here this morning, on the other hand, is not a game.
Amen.
Church and genuine Christianity is not a game. It's about eternity. Someone once said, this life is preparation for eternity. Eternity is the ultimate end zone. In many ways, we're to be focused on end zone living as well as Christians. But before we break the huddle this morning, I want us to spend a few moments looking towards our end zone, focusing on the goal at hand, which is to prepare for eternity. See, if there's anything that we can relate to in terms of the Super Bowl and the game of football itself, is that the stress that both teams are feeling right now and facing right now. Now, we know the Patriots have been there 1,000 times already, but you can't tell me that they're still not jittery and butterflies in their stomachs. And you know that the Eagles, after all that they've gone through to get there and everything, are not feeling the same thing. They're facing stress. But you know what? These guys have worked hard to be in this position. Devoted day in and day out during the season, and certainly during the off season. They've devoted their life to this game. And while they're right now experiencing the rewards of that, the Super Bowl, have you ever stopped to think about, what about all the other times? See, the Super Bowl is just one day. And yes, it's glorious for the players to be there. But think about what all they went through to get to this. What about the lonely times? 5 a.m. workouts, injuries and setbacks, getting cut from a team, missing a family event or a holiday because of the job. Sure, there's a lot of sacrifice. I think most professional athletes know a whole lot about devotion and dedication. I bet that for every great moment, for every Super Bowl moment in their life, they've had hundreds of times when they've been challenged to give up, to quit, to stop trying. The lonely times of life, times when we feel spent and broken, just plain tired out. Anybody relate to the lonely times in life? You know, in our gospel reading this morning, we see Jesus putting in some work. Jesus is doing some hard work. He's healing. He's casting out demons. He's doing all kinds of good things. And people are coming out in droves in Capernaum to see him, right? Shows up at the house. Peter's mother-in-law's out there. She's sick. He heals her. Boom. She gets up. She's feeling better. People are coming. It's basically the Super Bowl of ministry happening right here at Peter's mother-in-law's house. I mean, Jesus is there and he's healing people. And people are knocking at the door and it's going great. Jesus is crushing the opposition, but then something happens. Right in the middle of it, Jesus sneaks away. He gets out of town. He leaves it all. He leaves his adoring fans, and he doesn't even shout, "I'm going to Disney World," as he heads out the door. Instead, he goes someplace very different. Read Mark again. And immediately after they came out of the synagogue, they came into the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Now Simon's mother-in-law was laying sick with a fever. And immediately they spoke to Jesus about her, and he came to her and he raised her up. And he took her by the hand, and the fever left her, and she waited on them. And then when evening came and the sun had set, they began bringing him all who were ill and demon-possessed, and the whole city gathered at the door. And he healed many who were ill with various diseases and cast out many demons. Did you catch it? The whole city gathered at the door. And he was not permitting the demons to speak because they knew who he was. I mean, like I said, Jesus is here. I mean, he's throwing touchdown after touchdown. Jesus is well on his way to the Super Bowl win. Early the next morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went away to a secluded place and was praying there. And sure enough, the rest of the team comes looking for him. Simon and his companions searched for him, and then when they found him, they said to him, "Everyone is looking for you." Now, our translation this morning says he went to a secluded place. Boy, that sounds nice. A secluded place. That sounds peaceful, doesn't it? But was it really? This secluded place. Other translations, as Tina was talking this morning, if you look at other things, there's other translations that say different things. One says a lonely place. One says a desolate place. These are much different than a secluded place, isn't it? Now, some of you might be thinking, there's nothing more tempting than a lonely place or a secluded place. A lonely place where phones do not ring and loud voices are not shouting all at once to compete for our attention. A lonely place where we can hear ourselves think, feel our calm breathing, rediscover the inner rhythms which seek in vain to regulate our lives. A lonely place where we can listen to the wind rippling through the trees, or perhaps to the full and wise sound of stillness. A lonely place free from the cant of television and the condemnation of calendars. A place of tranquil rest and blessed retreat. There is nothing more tempting than a lonely place. For some of us, the secluded place might be a spot high in the mountains where the air is hushed and the world below seems serene. A rock on the edge of the ocean where we can lose our thoughts among the restless waves and vast great depths. Or even a private spot near our home where we can walk to be alone beneath the starry sky. For others, we must be content perhaps with a lonely place which is really just a time. A little solitude in the car between sales appointments, the last cup of morning coffee with only an accompaniment of the quietly humming refrigerator, or a few minutes watching the fire die in the fireplace. Perhaps the house silent after all others have gone to bed. This is what we envision when it comes to a lonely or secluded place. And we are tempted to say that sounds pretty good. In fact, there's nothing more tempting than a lonely place. And we all seek such places, guard them and cherish them. And in the morning, a great while before the day, Jesus rose and went out to a lonely place. And there he prayed. Boy, that sounds nice. One theology professor writes this. He says, "In my preaching classes, I ask my students to preach a sermon from any text of their choice from the first chapter of Mark's Gospel. There are many rich passages to be found there. The preaching of John the Baptist, the baptism of Jesus, the beginning of Jesus' ministry, the call of the first disciples, the healing of the leper. All of these stories and more are right there in Mark's first chapter. And yet most students do not select any of these passages for their sermon. Pressed by exams and papers, crowded by the demands of families and weekend jobs, feeling the pull of too much work and too many demands, most of them are irresistibly drawn to the seductive tranquility of the story about Jesus rising early in the morning to go to a lonely place. The sermons they create are as predictable as they are passionate. Jesus had spent the previous day, they say, in a fever pitch of ministry, preaching in the synagogue, healing the sick and the demon-possessed, and now, when he's in much need of retreat and rest, he rises early in the morning, gets away to a lonely place to pray. Just so, they go on to claim, we too need times of quiet reflection and serene prayer, lest the busy world crowd out the voice of God. As the old hymn goes, there is a place of quiet rest near to the heart of God. These sermons, like most sermons, say at least as much about the preachers as they do about the hearers. Ministers desperately need a lonely place. And there's nothing more tempting than this seclusion. But the problem is these sermons tend to miss out on something very important about the character of this lonely place that Jesus went to. You see, what Mark is saying in his gospel this morning is that the lonely place that Jesus went to was not a place of calm, but a place of temptation. The lonely place is not a placid retreat, but a place of crisis and decision. Whoa, way different than what we envisioned. You see, the word which is translated lonely place, or desolate place, or even secluded place, in our story in the Greek is eremos. The lonely place, in fact, is a too gentle translation of this word, because it hints at untroubled tranquility, like a fall afternoon in a peaceful woods, walking across the carpet of golden leaves. See, a better rendering of this word, a better translation of this is wilderness. A place filled with danger, where spirits lurk and temptation stalks. You see, Mark uses this word eremos many times in his opening chapter, and it always carries the meaning of a place where crucial and risky decisions are being made. The lonely place, or eremos, is a place of angels and demons, struggle and suffering, a place where life-changing decisions are made.
Amen.
See, it is out of the eremos that John the Baptist fills the air with his cry for repentance. John is, in Isaiah's word, the voice of one crying in the eremos. Jesus is driven by the Spirit, where? Into the eremos, into the wilderness to be tempted. And the eremos is inhabited by both angels and wild beasts.
Amen.
The eremos is the place where God's will is made clear and where the demand for obedience becomes urgent.
Amen.
It is also the place where the temptation to disobey is felt most powerfully. The eremos, make no mistake, is a holy place, alive with the presence of God. The eremos is a dangerous place as well, the atmosphere charged with the possibility of betrayal. And the eremos is a place where Jesus went that morning to pray. There is nothing more tempting than a lonely place, and there is no place where we are more likely to be tempted.
Amen.
And temptation came. Temptation came that morning. Now, we know the story of Jesus in the wilderness. And in fact, as we are approaching Lent, this is one of the things that we are remembering. Jesus' 40 days of tempting and fasting coincide with our 40 days, hopefully just fasting. But temptation will come whenever we're in a weakened position, whenever we're in a place, whenever we're desolate. Why did all the words this morning encourage us? We know that this is a desolate place. Trust God. Don't give up hope. Keep striving. See, the eremos is a place where Jesus was tempted. And this morning, we don't see that as the case. I mean, other places it says that, the devil came to him and challenged him with this, and you're hungry, eat bread, and throw yourself down, and have the nations worship you. I mean, we can see the temptation there. But where was the temptation this morning in Jesus' secluded place? In the lonely place, when Jesus was at prayer, the temptation came. And it came in a very surprising form. Peter, with those who found Jesus, said to him, everyone is searching for you.
Amen.
Everyone is searching for you, just like that. Like most real temptations, this one hardly even seems like a temptation. But in this apparently innocent sentence, there was a deep enticement to betrayal. Everyone is searching for you, says Peter. In other words, come back.
Amen.
Come back to the Super Bowl. Remember all the good stuff that was happening here? Remember the ministry they were doing? The whole town was there. They were lining up. They were there. It was awesome. Come back. Come back to Capernaum and stay.
Amen.
Stay where you healed the sick and astonished people with your preaching. See, people love and admire you there. Come back. Let your ministry end where it began. Or don't let it end at all. Let it just stay. Come on. Keep going. Become Capernaum's local wonder worker. Their private priest. Everyone is searching for you. Come back. Come back and stay. See, this was Jesus' Hermos. A lonely place with two paths leading out. One was back to Capernaum in a life of comfortable popularity.
Amen.
The other path led on to Golgotha, a costly sacrifice. One path was a place where everyone was crying Hosanna. The other path led to a place where he'd inevitably hear, crucify him. The lonely place was no place of serene reflection. It was a place of monumentous decision. The kingdom of self-interest versus the kingdom of God.
Oh, amen.
Facing the tempter again, Jesus said to Peter, what did he say? Let us go on. Let us go on to the next town, that I may preach there also, for that is why I came. As Henry Newen said, he said, the secret of Jesus' ministry is hidden in that lonely place where he went to pray. In the lonely place, Jesus finds the courage to follow God's will and not his own. To speak God's word and not his own. To do God's work and not his own. When we choose to follow Jesus, there's going to be lonely places for us too. Not the gentle, lonely place of retreat from the pressures of life, but the wilderness places. And the times when in the midst of crisis or simply heightened awareness, we must choose between our own will and God's. Choose between our own words and God's words, and choose between our own work and God's work. See, there is nothing more tempting than a lonely place, and there is nowhere where we are more likely to be tempted. You know, sometimes the lonely wilderness is a place of tumult, a place where we would not go unless we're driven there. Certainly we've been driven in the past, in our lives, to these places of wilderness. Maybe a marriage falls apart, a job is lost, a loved one suffers in pain, the one we have trusted betrays us. These are our times of wilderness, our lonely places. And their perils are all too clear. We know those, we recognize those. But sometimes it seems that the holy thing to do is to go to such places. The godly choice to make is to suffer in silence. Maybe it's God's will, we tell ourselves, or God would not place on us more than we can bear. These seems to be faithful options, something of a righteous que sera, sera. But we have to be careful. Sometimes a thing which appears most holy and sacrificial, for example, going back to live and minister among the needy people of Capernaum, is the very temptation that God would have us avoid.
Amen.
Elie Wiesel, in his book, The Town Beyond the Wall, there's a rebellious character who has profoundly experienced the lonely place of human suffering and who chooses to not bear this in silence. He loudly laments, crying angrily to God that his fate is unjust. Indeed, that God is unjust. It would seem that he had fallen into the snare of temptation. And it's understandable. This is a guy that experienced the Holocaust. And yet he confesses this. He says, I want to blaspheme, but I can't quite manage it. I go up against God, I shake my fist, I froth with rage, but there is still a way of telling him that he's there. That denial itself is an offering to his grandeur. The shout becomes a prayer in spite of me. Sometimes, when the lonely place is a place of great disturbance, it evokes our rage against God, clarifies how seriously we take God's power and presence, and thereby brings us even closer to God. But that's the point of these things, isn't it? The shout becomes a prayer in spite of ourselves. Most of the time, our wilderness places are not so nearly turbulent. maybe not even as recognizable. They are quieter, more gentle. Places close to home, the ordinary routine, the spaces between the activity of our lives where we nonetheless make the crucial decisions that will affect our future. The late pastor and author Carlisle Marney was once asked where the Garden of Eden was located. He responded, 215 Elm Street in Knoxville, Tennessee. The questioner found that incredulous and challenged Marney with the notion that the Garden of Eden was somewhere in Asia. Marney said, well, you couldn't prove that by me. He said, because it was at 215 Elm Street that as a boy I had stolen some money from my mother's purse and gone to the store and spent it on candy. But when I returned, I was so ashamed that I hid in the closet. That's where my mama found me, and she said, what are you? Where are you? What are you doing? Why are you hiding? What have you done? He said, the Garden of Eden, the place of temptation, the lonely place for me, was in the closet on Elm Street. See, the lonely place, the place of decision, the place of temptation, the place where we decide to follow God's will or follow our own way, can be anywhere. Breakfast table, a closet, a moment of insight, reading a novel, or an argument with someone we love, or in the morning, or at night, or when we're tired, or when we're refreshed, or in the singing of a worship song, or in the sighing of a prayer, the second act of a play, or even in the middle of a sermon. Methodist pastor and chaplain William Willimon once received an agitated telephone call on a Sunday evening from a parishioner at his church. He said that his daughter Anne had just decided to drop out of pharmacy school. Anne had been home for the weekend. In fact, she had been at church that morning worshiping with her mother and father, and then broke the news of her leaving school to them at that time. And it caught them totally by surprise. And Willimon asked Anne why he was doing such a thing, but the father was uncertain. What he mainly wanted for Willimon was to call his daughter and to talk some sense into her. So the pastor did. He called Anne and reminded her of the many hours she already put into pharmaceutical training and the many of her academic achievements, all of which now she seemed to be willing to throw away. How in the world did you come to this decision, he asked. Well, she said, it was your sermon yesterday that started me thinking. She went on to describe her own experience of a lonely place, and she admitted that she was in pharmacy school to earn a good living and to meet her own self-defined needs. The pastor's sermon had emphasized the call of God, which comes to all of us, that God has something important for each of us to do. And the sermon had caused Anne to remember the satisfying summer that she had spent teaching in the church literacy program among migrant workers, a time when she genuinely felt as though she was serving God. She told the pastor that after a sermon she decided to leave school and give her life to helping those people. There was a long silence on the end of the telephone, wrote Willimon. Now look, Anne, he said at last, I was just preaching. Even a sermon can be a lonely place, a place of temptation, a place of decision, a place of peril, a place of holiness. A lonely place is where we decide whether we shall go where we've been called to by God or go where we think is best.
Amen.
Jesus chose to go where he was sent, to the other towns. And we must never forget that because he did, he has come to our own town to minister as well. He's here even now, in our lonely places, beckoning us, if we will, to follow him. Tonight, we're going to see two teams consisting of athletes, coaches, and staff that have worked incredibly hard to be where they are right now. They have faced their moments of indecision and their lonely places head on and chosen to keep striving to be better. To not give it up and lie down. All for what? For a game. For a trophy. For things that will pass away. What about us? You know, we strive for something eternal, don't we? Something that will not rust. And that moss can't eat up. Will we face our challenges and our struggles in our lonely place for the prize that's set before us? You see, you might be going through your very own wilderness right now. You might be in the middle of it. And I ask you to trust God for his direction and his strength. I believe he'll send it. I really do. In fact, I think Scripture supports that. Over and over. How many times do we see God comforting Jesus when he's in his moments of weakness? The Garden of Gethsemane, sends angels to comfort him. In the wilderness, God, when Jesus went through his wilderness, was there for him. And you know what? I believe Jesus can handle a whole lot more than we can handle. So if God sends comfort to him and strength to him, how much more will he be there for us?
Amen.
You see, we are living an end zone life too. We're called to hold steady, keep the fight, and make it to the end zone. And it will be worth the struggle, I promise you. Don't quit. Don't give up. Don't stop climbing, because eternal life in heaven is going to blow away any Super Bowl party you could ever imagine. Amen. Let's ask the Lord to bless our offering this morning as we come together. And I encourage you, every week we do communion, and we always have the prayer team members there. And